And welcome to the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Info Session. My name is Ramona Washington, and I am a Study Abroad Coordinator in the UW-M Center for International Education. We're so excited that you're here to help us kick off our inaugural, I always stumble on that word, inaugural Education Abroad Week. Education Abroad Week is a week-long celebration of all things international, which includes our two-day virtual study abroad fair that's taking place tomorrow and Wednesday from 10 to 3 p.m. Central Time. So you can visit our website, studyabroad.uwm.edu, for more information on that. We hope you can join us for some more exciting sessions. But in today's session, we'll be focused on the Gilman Scholarship details and how to build a competitive application. So before we dive into the session, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items. First of all, we are recording this session. If you don't feel comfortable with this, please note that the recording will be available on our website later this week. Secondly, we ask that you do mute yourself when you're not speaking to ensure that the sound quality is good and that we can understand each other. And thirdly, if you have any questions, you can feel free to type them in the chat. We do have a few people on this call today, so it's going to be pretty informal, but if you have any questions, you can absolutely feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm joined by my colleague, Yomari Castellano, who will be... she's excited to be here as well, and she'll be she's recording it for me, and she'll be monitoring the chat for any questions that you might have, and just kind of assisting as well. So she's also a study abroad coordinator in our office.
Thank you and welcome.
Excellent. Okay, so now let's see if I can get to my PowerPoint. There we go. So thanks for joining again for the Gilman Scholarship Application info session. This is the first time doing this virtually. I normally do this in person in one of our conference rooms here on campus. So bear with me if I stumble a little bit on the technology. But first of all, a little bit about our office. The Center for International Education is a comprehensive international office. We have a couple different teams in our center. We have the International Student and Scholar Services team, which helps our international students. And so those are the degree-seeking students who are here at UWM to either continue their degree or completely obtain their degree from UWM. So they're Panthers just like you, and they are international students. Then we have the Institute of World Affairs, and they do a lot of K through 16 outreach to schools. It houses the Model UN. They do a lot of they bring in international speakers all around campus to talk about international and global issues. And so they do a lot of outreach to schools from K through 16. And then finally, we have the Study Abroad team, which is where I'm housed. And that deals with our affiliate exchange programs and incoming exchange students. So basically the opposite of what students who are studying abroad here do, going away abroad for a semester or for an academic year or summer or winter or anything like that. So those are the students who come to study abroad here at UWM for a term or so. So the Gilman Scholarship, just a quick overview of the scholarship. It's sponsored by the Department of State, and it's administered by the Institute of International Education. The scholarship program enables students of limited financial means to study or intern abroad. And basically, they really encourage students to select from a diverse array of countries, and they're really interested in students who are studying language. You don't have to study a language when you do a Gilman Scholarship, but they're really interested in selecting students who are interested in studying in non-traditional locations and who are interested in studying a language, particularly critical need languages, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The basic award can be up to $5,000 for a study abroad for up to 1 academic year. And it's been around, the program's been around since 2001, so they've helped about over 30,000 undergrads to study or intern abroad. So they've helped an enormous amount of students. It's very well known in the industry, so it's a great program. So the requirements, these are a list of the requirements to study abroad or to obtain the Gilman Scholarship. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be at an undergrad status at a U.S. accredited institution. So it's not for grad students at all, unfortunately. And UW-Milwaukee is a U.S. accredited institution, so you qualify in that regard. But another big qualification is that you have to be receiving a Pell Grant. So you have to be a Pell Grant recipient either at the time that you apply for the Gilman Scholarship or when you study abroad. So in case your financial status changes, you have to be receiving a Pell Grant at either the time of application or when your program takes place. That's a super important qualification. You have to be participating in a 4-credit program that spends at least 3 weeks in one country. So they've changed that recently, actually. It used to be a minimum of 4 weeks in one country, and now they've changed it to 3 weeks in one country. And given these current times, it can be a virtual study or internship experience as well. So if you're exploring a virtual or internship experience, you still are eligible for the Gilman Scholarship. They've pivoted and become flexible with that during this current pandemic. So related to that, a program must be in a country with a level 1 or a level 2 travel advisory according to the U.S. Department of State. And you'll also notice underneath there, and this is something that they've designed specifically in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, is that if you're choosing a country for a study abroad in 2021, and that country is at a level 3 or a level 4 because of COVID, Gilman will still consider you eligible. However, when your program is about to start, the country cannot still be at a level 3 or a level 4, even if only due to COVID by the time the program starts. So then you would be required to change your location. So it sounds like the Gilman folks are being cautiously optimistic, as we are in our office, to really help students still consider, because the entire world is being affected by this pandemic. So they're really encouraging students to still consider all countries, really, but just knowing that if things are still categorized as a level 3 or a level 4 because of COVID, you may need to be considering flexibility with your program location or postponement. So those are the requirements to actually just qualify for the Gilman Scholarship. So these are the selection criteria. So this is what the selection committee will be looking at in terms of ranking your scholarship application. One is the potential for impact on your academic and career trajectory. And that basically means that they're going to be really looking at folks who describe how students envision their study abroad opportunity will impact them in terms of advancing their academic career, their academics, in terms of their career goals and aspirations, and all of those things, and how you think study abroad will affect you as a person going forward once you've done this experience. They're also interested in the community impact abroad and upon return. So one of the big goals of the Gilman philosophy is really to help students understand this mutual understanding between the U.S. and the world. So they want students to really reflect on how they think that experience will come back to their home country as well, and how they can impact their home community, really. So that's one thing to think about when you're thinking about writing your essays, that I'm going to talk about as well. Another selection criteria is academic preparedness. There is no minimum GPA for the Gilman Scholarship, which is interesting enough. But you are required to submit your transcript. So a student with a 3.8 GPA is eligible in the same way that a student with a 2.8 GPA is eligible. But just kind of understanding that in all likelihood, a student with a higher GPA, that's going to bode well in your favor, of course. And they're going to be looking at your transcript just to see what your academic background has been. Diversity or of background and experience of a candidate, that is referring basically to students who are, say, first-generation students, students of color, students from community colleges, or students from minority serving institutions and things like that. So just kind of understanding what the applicant pool can look like, as well as the eligibility criteria. One thing to keep in mind when you're writing your essay is that that's where you're going to really put in some of those particular selection criteria items, because the selection criteria or the review panel is not able to make any assumptions about your background. So if you are a first generation student, you'll definitely want to mention that in your essay and things like that. Any of that particular selection criteria that you qualify for, you'll want to include that in your personal essay that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then finally, the commitment to proficiency in a critical need language. Again, Gilman is very much of a proponent of encouraging language learning. And so if you're going to be learning a language that we're going to talk about is deemed a critical need language for Gilman, there's a selection or an essay for you to do that in as well. So details on the scholarship. The upcoming deadline for this current cycle is October 6th, which is coming up sooner than you might think, actually. And those are for programs all starting in January of 2021 through December of 2021. So essentially the calendar year, any program that's starting in those dates, you can apply on the October 6th deadline. They have two deadlines per year, basically. The next cycle and deadline is going to be in early March. They haven't actually announced when that specific deadline will be, but it's always in early March. And those are for programs that will be starting in May of 2020 and go through April of 2021. So the really nice thing about that is, like, knowing these deadlines early is that, for instance, with the October 6th deadline, perhaps you're interested in learning and planning to study abroad in summer of next year, summer of 2021 or fall of 2021. You can actually apply now for the October 6th deadline, and you would know that early. You would find out in December. The Gilman website has a timeline on notifications and things like that. So you'd probably find out in November or December whether or not you got your scholarship for your program next year. That way you'd know if you got that free money or not, number one. And number two, if you didn't get the scholarship this cycle, you can apply next March as well again, and work on maybe tightening up your essay and things like that. So the advantage of applying early is that, again, you know whether or not you got the funds that early, and also you can apply again if you didn't get it for that cycle. So it is due by 11:59 Pacific time. It used to be Central Time, but they've changed that. 11:59 Pacific time on the due date, basically. But don't wait until the last minute. You don't want to be one of those folks whose internet went down, or for whatever technical reason you missed the deadline. The earlier in the day you can submit your application, the better, because they do not make any exceptions for late applications. Now, what does the application entail? Basically, it's an online student application. You've got a student section where you'll enter a lot of information about demographic information about yourself, your name, your university, your program details, where you would like to go, when you would like to go, and things like that. There are also some essays that we'll talk about that you have to submit, and they have length limits as well. And then there are a couple of advisor certifications that you'll need to submit. One is the Study Abroad Advisor certification. I am the campus rep for Gilman, so I would be certifying that for you. And then there's a Financial Aid Advisor certification. So I mentioned earlier that one of the big qualifications and requirements for this scholarship is being a Pell recipient. And so the Financial Aid Advisor would in fact be verifying that you would be a Pell Grant recipient during the time that you specified. Both the Financial Aid Advisor and I have an additional week after you submit your application, after the Gilman applicant deadline, to certify all of the applications for Gilman with that information. And I failed to mention what I certify. As a Study Abroad Advisor, I certify that your program details are basically true and correct, that you actually are in fact applying to a study abroad program. So again, there's nothing that you would need to do on your part. This is just sort of an FYI that there's a step after you submit your application that involves verifying the information. And then the other thing that you'll have to submit as part of your application is a copy of your transcripts of any and all undergraduate schools that you've gone to. You can build that into your timeline. They do require, they're okay with you submitting an unofficial transcript during the application process, but if you are awarded the scholarship, they would require an actual official transcript. So just kind of keep that in mind in terms of obtaining an unofficial transcript for your Gilman application. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier that you have to have either a complete or in progress application through the study abroad, through your homeschool study abroad office, through the CIE. So, one thing I didn't mention, and you'll notice in terms of the application, is that there's no recommendations, right? So you've got the online student section, you've got the advisor certifications, that's something you don't even need to worry about, and then submitting your transcripts. So really the bulk of your application, the critical part of your application, are the essays. And there's a couple of different essays that you have to submit. One essay is the statement of purpose. This is crucial for your application. I cannot stress this enough. Again, because there are no letters of recommendation that you're requesting. I really would encourage you to be as specific as possible in describing your reasons for studying abroad, keeping in mind that this is a scholarship for an academic study abroad or credit-bearing opportunity. And so what I mean by that is these questions here, these next 4 bullets, are really pulled directly from the Gilman website in terms of the prompt questions. And I would highly encourage you to really reflect on these questions before you even start to type your essay. I've had an opportunity, it's been a few years now, but I sat on a selection committee for Gilman, and really the essays that we ranked highly were the ones that not only thought about, everyone always said they had always wanted to study abroad, but the essays that stood out were the ones that said they had always wanted to study abroad, but they reflected on why they wanted to study abroad. So I would say as personable as you can make your application in this essay, the better. To give you an idea, we probably had, there'll be a selection committee who reads your essays, and I had to read probably between 75 and 80 essays for this scholarship. And to be honest, they all do start to sound the same after a while. And so to make yourself stand out as much as possible and to individualize and personalize your essay is to personalize your essay. Really reflect on not just the fact that you've always wanted to study abroad, but why is that? Like, what sparked your interest in the first place to study abroad? Perhaps you had a neighbor who was from another country, or you went to a folk fair, international folk fair, whatever it was that helped you that sort of spark that initial interest in studying abroad. Think about that, reflect on that first before you even start to think about, what you want to put in your essay, because that sort of tells your study abroad journey. And that's going to be individual for every single person. So really thinking about what your personal study abroad journey is, why you're interested in global and international things, is really going to help you personalize your essay as much as possible. So on understanding, how will studying abroad help you achieve your future academic and professional goals? We talked about that earlier. Talking about your specific program, why did you choose your program? What special meaning does that have to you in terms of your academic and professional and career goals and personal goals, perhaps? And then how prepared are you to be a successful scholar and sort of a diplomat for the Gilman scholarship? And if you have any examples of skills and experiences or challenges that you overcame, those are all things, again, that will make you a person, an individual to whoever is reading your essay. But because, again, that personal aspect is something that you really want to put in your essay. So the other essay that you would be required to write is called a community impact statement. And this is actually composed of two mini essays. This statement has too many parts to it, too many, M-I-N-I parts to it. So the first one is building a mutual understanding essay. And so they really want to know, as a U.S. citizen, how you will represent and share what it means to be an American during your program, right? So how will you seek opportunities to become more culturally engaged and have meaningful interactions with people and cultures different from your own? Again, a pretty heavy question. So that's one that you should really kind of think about and reflect on before you even start to write this essay. Like how will you represent yourself and your university and Gilman and the U.S. to some extent? What kind of person and global citizen will you be while you're abroad? The other part of this community impact statement is a follow-on service project proposal. And I like to call it the paying it forward project, follow-on project, basically. So what kind of project would you undertake to help promote international education, to help promote the Gilman Scholarship, to help promote cultural understanding? They really want you to think of something that will sort of further that global citizenship that you started to take and help your home community perhaps understand the importance of a global education. And that can be anything you want, really, essentially. They want it to be creative and achievable, essentially. And obviously address the goals that we talked about here in terms of creating awareness of studying abroad and the Gilman program. But the Gilman website has a ton of examples of that. Students always want to know, well, what does that mean? What do those projects look like? And there are a lot of examples on the Gilman website, which is another great resource for you to use. But oftentimes it could be things like talking to your old high school, perhaps, or I like to think of it in terms of if you're already a member of some organization, something that you're already organically a member of. It could be a community organization, it could be a campus organization, it could be your church community, whatever it would be. They want you to sort of, maybe even do a presentation to that group, that community, to help them understand your experience. And again, the importance of having a global academic experience that you had. It could be things like, perhaps blogging while you're abroad and helping folks like in the moment understand the experience that you're having. So they want you to be as creative as possible, because again, it's all about, when you're applying for this scholarship or any scholarship, really making yourself stand out among the others that are applying for it. Another thing that you can think of is if you have a special skill, perhaps you are a photographer, a photography major, or an art major, or an English major, and you're a really good writer. Really pulling in your special skills that you have that's tied to that academic component of your life and your program, really. That will also help that's something that you can draw on to help maybe inspire you to think of a follow-on project in that regard.
Can I add something, Ramona?
Absolutely.
So I also had the privilege to serve on one of the Gilman scholarship review committees, and I have to say that, even when like advising students, they think of the follow-on project as just something super huge and just seeming like it's, I don't want to say like not achievable or accessible, but it just seems like a lot. The way that I would encourage you to look at it is that when you come across something that you really like, you really enjoy, you're going to naturally want to share with other people, right? So just looking at it as, like Ramona say, paying it forward, something that you will already naturally want to do. So think of like creative ways that you can continue to, share the good news about an international education experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very good points. It's all about sharing. Caring is sharing, right? So this is actually an essay requirement for only those who would be studying a critical need language. And the next slide actually identifies what critical need languages are. But this is not something that everyone would do. The purpose of Gilman, again, they really want to encourage students to study abroad in diverse countries and maybe perhaps non-traditional locations. And so they really want students to learn another language. It doesn't make you ineligible if you're going to Great Britain or Australia. It just means that you might need to maybe address in your essay why you're sort of selecting an English-speaking country versus a non-English speaking country. There could be a perfectly good reason for that, but it's always a good idea to kind of address that because Gilman really wants to encourage folks to study language and to kind of go to the unbeaten path with studying abroad. So for those folks who would be doing a critical need language, they want to know what your motivations are for improving your language proficiency and how you intend to improve your language skills. So really kind of think about these questions as well, like how do you intend to use your language? How will you plan to use your language skills in your academic goals and career goals? Again, all roads lead back to those academic and career goals. So really reflecting on why you selected that language, what it means to you. Perhaps there's a heritage component to that language learning, but what does that mean to you personally, professionally, academically? All of those things are really going to be important as you're looking at your critical need language essay. There are limits to these essays. I forgot to mention that. You may be wondering, how long do I have? How much room, how much space do you have? So the personal statement essay is a 7,000 character limit. That's characters, so that includes spaces. And then the community impact statement is 7,000 characters as well. And then the critical need language essay is 2,000 characters. So 7,000 characters is about a page and 3/4. Not a lot of space at all. So you really have to be succinct in your essays. And obviously the critical need language is 2,000 characters. That's probably like a paragraph or so, right? So really being succinct and thinking about how these opportunities are going to impact you, again, professionally, academically, and personally. So this is a list of what Gilman deems as critical need languages. So you'll see there's quite a long list here, but it's going to be languages, again, that they deem critically needed throughout the world. And so the basic award for Gilman is $5,000, up to $5,000. And with the critical need language supplement, you can get a potential $3,000 supplement. So potentially up to $8,000 for this Gilman scholarship to study abroad. The basic award, again, is $5,000. And if you're studying a critical need language supplement, you could get an additional $3,000.
And just to add, we've had, at least from what I can remember, 2 students who received $8,000. And they were participating in a program in Beijing where they could take a Mandarin language course and then the rest of their classes were taught in English. So it is possible.
It's very possible. And actually, I remember the other one was studying Portuguese. Portuguese comes and goes on this list, I feel like. I was updating the PowerPoint this morning and Portuguese had reappeared. So it's not always on there, but the other student I remember she'd gone to Brazil and gotten Portuguese. So they got $8,000 to study abroad.
That's pretty awesome.
We love that. So here are a few tips. These are kind of general tips, actually. It's on this, we're presenting it here for this Gilman session, but really these are tips that you can use for any scholarship you're applying for. Basically, it's always a good idea to reread the essay prompts again and make sure you understand what's being asked of you, right? So we talked about all of those essays that we talked about have specific questions. So really, again, reflecting on those questions, thinking them through before you even start to like type out any of your answers. We talked about word and character limits. Brainstorming. Brainstorming is a great way. That's actually it's a good idea to know your writing practice. That's not the way I write, actually. I like throw everything out there on a page, whatever it is I'm thinking I want to include in an essay, and then I kind of flush the ideas out. So brainstorming is a great way to kind of put everything out there that you think you want to say, and then tying it together and trimming it as things go along. Outlining is also another good thing if you're an outliner, yeah. That's a great way to also kind of build your essay from an outline. Once you've got a draft, though, print it and read a hard copy. I think you tend to catch a lot of errors or non-cohesive things in your essay if once you have an actual printed copy out of your essay. And then making sure that you've responded to everything that's being asked of you. Make sure you're not forgetting or skipping any of those prompt questions that are in the essay instructions. It's always a good idea if you have someone that you think is smarter than you or a better writer than you to ask them to proof your essays for you. I have students who are English majors, but it's always still a good idea to have someone that you trust and that you think has good writing skills to proof your essay as well. And then at UWM, there's a writing center. If you haven't visited the writing center, I've heard good things from it, about it from students. It's in Curtin Hall, the first floor of Curtin Hall, and they give out great advice to students on their writing their essays, whether it be for school or for scholarship opportunities. We actually visited with them with all the writing advisors fall of last year, I think it was, to help them understand. They had been seeing more and more students who wanted help with their essays for scholarships in general. And so we did a little mini session with them on the Gilman, what exactly is the Gilman scholarship and things like that. So they're familiar with the scholarship over there, and they're really good at helping students to kind of flush out their essays and really get to the nitty-gritty of the points that are being asked of you. A few other tips, give specific examples. I mentioned earlier about really personalizing your essays, right? No one's going to be talking about you but you. So it's really important to give specific examples, challenges that you've overcome, specific examples again about why you're interested in studying abroad or interning abroad, super important. Explaining things clearly, again, personalizing it. How are you different from the other applicants? Why do you deserve the scholarship above someone else? Why are you unique to the scholarship? Again, from experience in reading and sitting on a Gilman panel, two things everyone said in their essay. One is that they had always wanted to study abroad, right? We talked about that, and that's great. But you have to explain, or you should explain, again, why you want to study abroad. And the other thing is that they really needed the money, and that's completely understandable. And there's no harm in putting that in there, but also understanding and recognizing that everyone who qualifies for the scholarship is a Pell Grant recipient, and that sort of equalizes that a little bit. So it's not bad to put that in there, but just kind of understanding that doesn't make you necessarily unique in this situation. But be enthusiastic about your record. If you do have that 3.8 GPA, be enthusiastic about it and focusing on the positive and what you have done. If you don't have that 3.8, that's okay. Again, you're not ineligible for the scholarship, but perhaps you have 3 jobs or you have family obligations, or just really, again, explaining your life and who you are. I think it's really important to let the folks reading your application understand the person behind the paper, right? Like there's a person here, they have a story, and be sure you tell your story. Other tips, again, meeting the preference factors, especially if you're going to be studying abroad in a non-traditional location, they like to call it. That's going to be great for you. Let's see, your essays, again, having a well-written, coherent, and thoughtful essay. That's going to be something you're going to be doing with the Writing Center, with folks who are really good writers, with myself. I'll have my information on here. I'm happy to read any essays. And then again, developing that creative and achievable follow-on community project statement. Understanding award terms. This is, again, just really good general advice for any scholarship that you apply for, really. How much is the award? How is it dispersed to you? What will it cover? With the Gilman Scholarship, there aren't any restrictions on it. I think you have to, except for I think you have to fly through a U.S. carrier when you fly. But other than that, there aren't any restrictions on what it will cover. And then it's dispersed to you through a check. It's not posted into your PAWS account. It will be a lump sum. And then we talked about the follow-up requirements, which would be those community impact statement where you developed your follow-on project. There is you have to write a 2-page report after your follow-on project that sort of summarizes how things went, whatever that might be, and what impact you had on the audience that you served. And the expectation is that you complete your follow-on project within 6 months after your return from abroad. So really another just general tips is planning and making a timeline for your application, whether or not you need certifications and who's certifying it for you, doing your drafts of your essay. Drafts are really important. That's another way I discovered what my writing style is. One is the brainstorming and the other one is the drafts. Draft upon draft upon draft, just to really perfect it and make your application as concise and cohesive as possible. Again, just reflecting back on my time of sitting in on selection panels, spelling counts. It shows you took time with it. That cohesiveness counts. Again, it really reflects and shows that the applicant has taken a lot of time with their application. Grammar counts. So making drafts, stepping back from your essay if you need to do that. I did discover that about myself, is that a little time away from an essay is a good thing because you come back to it with fresh eyes. And so those drafts are super important in really honing in and making your essay as perfect as possible. And then, of course, we know the deadline coming up in early October and then early March for the Gilman Scholarship. We talked a little bit about this already. It should be submitted online. But again, this is just general advice for any application you're submitting. Does it have to be submitted in person or by mail? We have one scholarship that's on hold that had to be a paper application at this point, but just understanding in general, again, how scholarships are working as specifically for that particular type of scholarship. There are no recommendations for Gilman, but understanding if a recommendation is needed for another scholarship, if it's okay for you to submit the recommendation or if the recommendation has to be submitted separately or directly from that person. So more resources, the UW Writing Center that I mentioned earlier is a great resource. Someone that you think is better than you in terms of writing is another great resource. The Gilman website, phenomenal resource. They even have little webinars that they do for students every cycle, and they're recorded webinars as well on their website that talks about assembling a competitive application. It talks about those follow-on project ideas, great ideas there. There's a whole list of follow-on ideas if you're stumped. But they really have some good advice and tips. They profile past recipients and things like that. So I would highly encourage you to go onto the Gilman website, explore. If you're thinking about studying abroad, whether it be for spring, the next cycle, or beyond, it's never too early to start planning your Gilman scholarship application or any scholarship application, really. But the Gilman, I definitely encourage you to explore the Gilman website. And then I'm a good resource for you. That's me, Ramona Washington. There's my email address there. You can feel free if you've got questions after the session. Once you're ready to apply for Gilman, I'm happy to read students' essays and give feedback. So I'm a resource for you as well. Other scholarship opportunities are study abroad, our website, uwm.edu. Other external websites are great, sort of comprehensive scholarship opportunity websites. And then there are some specific website or specific opportunities at UWM. They can be regional, they can be based on your school or college. The financial aid website has a great list of scholarships as well there. So really being super organized and super motivated to look for money and free money at that will really help you in funding your study abroad opportunity. I forgot to mention one other thing with the scholarships. We do have financing sessions at UWM, and those help students to understand their financial aid in terms of studying abroad. So even though we've got scholarships that are available, it's really important if you get financial aid to understand how financial aid works with studying abroad. And you can visit our website, which is there again, to understand when or to find out when those sessions will be. Just a quick overview of our application process. Our deadlines are always October 1 and March 1, with the caveat that some programs have an earlier deadline, so it's important to check for each specific program. But typically our deadlines are October 1 for spring and winter programs, so just coming up quickly, and then March 1 for summer and fall or academic year programs. Our application is actually online as well completely, and you can turn things in piece by piece. You don't have to sit down in one session and complete the whole thing. But you do have to have a completed application to be eligible or to apply for scholarships. And then a quick overview of what pieces we require for our application. It's online application. There's a $100 application fee. We'll need your unofficial transcript, and that's the free one that you can get from PAWS. There may be some recommendations, academic recommendations. So that has to be a recommendation from a professor or a TA who's had you in a class before. So depending on the program, you may need to submit an academic recommendation, and then you may need to submit an advisor conference sheet, right? It is study abroad, so we want to make sure students are having that conversation with their advisor. Really important to be strategic about picking not just a program, but picking classes for your program. So you may need to, depending on the program, you may need to have a conference with your advisor, your academic advisor. Student statement, depending on the program, you may need to submit that, and that would be essentially why do you want to study abroad? How do you expect study abroad will impact you? A lot of the same things that the Gilman Scholarship you'll notice required. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, of course. You can repurpose your essays for any scholarship you're applying for to sort of tweak it for the specific question. There may also be a language evaluation depending on the program, and then there may also be a host school application. So you've got your UWM application, your home school application, your home university application, but then there's typically a second application that comes later as well. That's it. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. I think I know I talked a lot there, and there's a lot of information there, but Yumadi, were there any questions in the chat at all?
At this point, no, but doesn't mean that there might not be.
Well, I saw that you threw our website in the chat. Gosh, I think there was a lot of information there, I know. So if anyone has any questions, I know it was a pretty thorough presentation. But if there's anything else folks would want to know, we'll give you an opportunity to type them in the chat now.
And as you're thinking about your questions, again, want to invite you to join us for the rest of Education Abroad Week. We have the fair tomorrow and Wednesday from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. and then some awesome sessions on Thursday and Friday. And you can find more information about those on our website. Also, just be sure to note that our virtual study abroad fair requires you to register. It literally takes like 2 seconds, so just be sure to do that. And there you will learn information about our study abroad programs, whether on site or virtual, as well as international internship experiences. So don't miss out. And we will also have our financial aid liaison, Gayla Jenkins, there to answer any questions that you may have about again, how to apply financial aid to your study abroad or internship experience. So we hope that you can join us.
Absolutely. And if you have if you'd like to drop your email in the chat, I can follow up with you, whether it be for Gilman or anything else. We're happy to send a follow-up email to you as well.
Awesome. Well, if you don't have any questions, thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.